Sagittarius, the sacred turning point. Choosing yourself over waiting. When waiting turns into a silent mourning, there was a time you believed that waiting was part of love, that if you were patient enough, the other person would one day see your worth and meet you where your heart stood open. And Sagittarius, your faith in love is one of your greatest gifts. But there is a fine line between waiting and losing yourself. At some point, the pause you thought was temporary turns into a slow fading of your own laughter, your own dreams, your own voice. What once felt like hope begins to feel like mourning, not for them but for the parts of you that have gone quiet while you've been standing still. It is a quiet kind of grief. No one sees the moments you swallow your words because you don't want to push too hard. No one counts the times you've stepped back from your own joy because it might make them uncomfortable. You tell yourself that this is love's sacrifice, that this is what loyalty looks like. But underneath, your soul knows the truth. Love was never meant to keep you waiting on the edge of your own life. And then without fanfare or lightning, a different door appears. A door that does not lead to them but back to yourself. Beyond it is the place where you no longer measure your worth by someone else's timeline. Beyond it is the moment you stop hoping to be chosen and start choosing yourself. If you're here reading these words, perhaps this is that moment for you. Let this be the gentle reminder you've been seeking. Like this message so it can reach another soul who needs it. Share it with someone standing in their own waiting place. And subscribe to walk with me as we explore what it truly means to come home to yourself. Gate 1. The days you stood on the edge of your own life. It doesn't happen all at once. You don't wake up one morning and decide to step aside from the center of your own life. It begins subtly in moments that feel small, even harmless. You postpone a trip you've been dreaming of because they just need more time to figure things out. You hold back from sharing an exciting idea because they seem preoccupied, and you don't want to overwhelm them. You tell yourself it's just a pause, just a moment of giving space. But Sagittarius, you know better than anyone how easily a pause can stretch into years when you're waiting for someone to catch up to your pace. First, the sacrifice feels like love. You think, if I can be patient, if I can stand here long enough, they'll see what I've always known, that we're meant to walk this path together. So you wait. You wait through birthdays, through opportunities that pass by, through invitations you decline because now isn't the right time. And while you wait, the world keeps moving. Friends share their milestones. Seasons shift. The constellations will overhead. And slowly, you begin to notice that your own story is no longer unfolding. You're watching it from the sidelines. I remember speaking with a Sagittarius woman named Alara. She had dreams of starting her own art studio, a vision that lit up her whole being whenever she talked about it. But her partner at the time wasn't ready for such a big change. "It's too risky right now," he would say, "or maybe later when things are more stable." She agreed, over and over, telling herself it was only a delay. But as the months turned into years, she found herself less and less connected to the fire that had once driven her. "I didn't even realize how far I'd stepped away from myself," she told me. "It was like I was living in a waiting room, watching my life through a glass wall." Sagittarius, your nature is to move toward what calls you, to take aim at distant horizons and trust that the journey will shape you. But when you wait too long for someone to decide if they'll walk beside you, your bow grows heavy, your aim falters, and your own path begins to blur. And the quiet danger is that waiting becomes a habit. You get so used to delaying your joy for their readiness that you start believing this is what love requires. The truth? Love should never require you to put your life on hold indefinitely. Yes, relationships ask for patience, for compromise, for moments of slowing down. But there is a difference between slowing your pace to walk together and stopping entirely to watch them figure out if they even want to take the journey. The first is love. The second is self-abandonment. And here's the part many don't tell you. Every time you put your own dreams in storage just for now, you lose a little of the trust you have in yourself. You start to believe that your desires are negotiable, that they can be set aside without consequence. But your soul feels the cost. The dreams you set aside don't disappear. They wait quietly, becoming heavier each time you ignore them. Alara eventually reached a breaking point. Not in anger, but in a moment of clarity. She was sitting alone in her small apartment, sketchbook in hand, and realized she hadn't drawn anything just for herself in almost 18 months. "It hit me," she said. "I was waiting for someone to give me permission to live my life. And they weren't going to. That was never their job. It was mine. When you stand on the edge of your own life for too long, you risk forgetting how it feels to be in the center. You risk mistaking the absence of conflict for the presence of love. You risk building your days around someone else's readiness instead of your own calling. And Sagittarius, your calling is not something that waits patiently. It pulls at you, tugs at you, refuses to let you settle for a life half-lived. The days you stand on the edge are not wasted if you can recognize them for what they are. An invitation to step back in, to stop watching and start participating again. To take the trip, to start the project, to say yes to the opportunity without asking who will or won't come along. Because the truth is, the people who truly belong in your life will not need you to put yourself on hold to keep them close. They will find a way to walk with you, even if the road is unfamiliar. And here's the beautiful thing. The moment you step back into the center of your life, the world responds. Your energy shifts. Your eyes brighten. The air feels lighter. And you remember what it feels like to move forward, not with resentment for the time you lost, but with gratitude for the fact that you are moving again at all. Because Sagittarius, the edge was never meant to be your home. It was only ever a vantage point. A place to see the truth clearly before you chose to return to the heart of your own journey. And the moment you take that step back in, you'll find the path has been waiting for you all along. Gate 2. The moment you realize you don't need to be chosen. Awakening often arrives without fireworks. It doesn't come in a dramatic goodbye or a door slammed shut. More often it's born in stillness. A quiet afternoon, a passing thought that lands so softly you almost miss it. For Sagittarius, that moment might be as simple as looking at someone you've been waiting for and realizing they're not late. They're just walking a different road entirely. It's not a sudden rejection of love. It's a gentle but unshakable knowing. You've been holding out for something that isn't coming, at least not in the way you imagined. And in that knowing, there's both grief and relief. Grief for the time you spent in the waiting place and relief for the release it brings, because the moment you stop waiting, you start moving again. I once spoke with a Sagittarius man named Orion, who had been in a long-distance relationship for nearly 5 years. His partner kept saying, "When things settle down, I'll move closer." He believed her. He rearranged his life to keep the connection alive, traveling back and forth, building his schedule around her availability. But one evening, as he sat alone at a cafe in her city, waiting for her to show up yet again, something shifted. He realized he had been structuring his entire existence around the possibility that one day she would choose to be fully present. And in that moment he saw the truth. He didn't need her to choose him to be whole. He could choose himself right there, right then. Sagittarius, this is the turning point, when you understand that your worth is not negotiable, not conditional, not something that needs external confirmation. You could wait forever for someone to recognize it, or you could honor it yourself and watch how the entire landscape of your life transforms. Because when you stop trying to prove your value, you free yourself from the exhausting cycle of performing for love. Many of us are taught to see being chosen as the ultimate validation, that if someone picks us, it means we're enough. But here's the paradox. Waiting for someone's choice keeps you trapped in a constant state of questioning. Every delay feels personal. Every hesitation feels like a verdict. And you start interpreting their uncertainty as a reflection of your worth, instead of what it really is, a reflection of their own readiness, capacity, or path. The moment you see this clearly, everything shifts. You stop mistaking someone's hesitation for a sign that you should try harder. You stop shrinking your needs to make space for their comfort. You stop rehearsing what you'll say to convince them you're worth choosing. And in that space, something profound happens. You realize you have the power to choose yourself without waiting for anyone's permission. This choice doesn't have to mean ending the relationship or cutting ties. For some, it does. But for others, it's about reclaiming the center of your life while still loving from a place of strength. It's telling yourself, I will keep walking toward my dreams, and if they want to join me, they will. But I won't stand still waiting. Orion's story didn't end with bitterness. He didn't call his partner and demand answers. Instead, he began living as though his life was already complete, because in truth it was. He signed up for a language class, joined a hiking group, and started planning a solo trip he'd been putting off for years. Something remarkable happened. The more he chose himself, the less desperate he felt for her to choose him. And ironically, it was then that she started showing up more consistently, not because he'd manipulated her into it, but because his self-respect created a different kind of gravity. Sagittarius, you are ruled by Jupiter, the planet of expansion, truth, and possibility. You are not meant to orbit endlessly around someone else's indecision. The gift of this moment, the sacred turning point, is that you can step out of that orbit and return to your own trajectory, trusting that the right people will align with you naturally. When you realize you don't need to be chosen, you start to see how much of your energy was spent on earning something that was never supposed to be earned. Love isn't a prize for good behavior. It's an exchange between two people who are already standing in their own worth. The love that truly belongs in your life won't require you to wait in the wings. It will meet you center stage. And so, this is the invitation. Stop measuring your life in the spaces between someone else's decisions. Choose yourself now, fully, without hesitation. The rest will either rise to meet you or fall away. And either way, you'll be free. Gate through the sovereign return. Choosing yourself is not a rejection of love. It's a rejection of any love that asks you to disappear to keep it. For Sagittarius, this return to yourself is both a homecoming and a reclamation. It's the moment you step back into the center of your own life. Not with defiance, but with quiet authority. You begin to remember what it feels like to live from your core, not from the edges where you were once waiting. It often begins with small acts, almost imperceptible to anyone else, but monumental to you. You speak your mind without cushioning your words to protect someone's comfort. You say yes to an opportunity without running it through the filter of how they might respond. You laugh, not politely, not softly, but with the full-bodied joy you once thought you needed to temper. These aren't acts of rebellion. They're acts of restoration. I recall a Sagittarius woman named Lyra who had spent years in a relationship where she felt she had to manage her presence. Too much enthusiasm, and he would withdraw. Too much independence, and he would sulk. When she chose herself, she didn't storm out or make a grand announcement. Instead, she began showing up differently. She signed up for a photography course she'd been wanting to take for years. She reconnected with old friends. She started going on solo weekend trips to places that called to her spirit. It wasn't about leaving him, she told me. It was about coming back to me. When you reclaim your sovereignty, you shift the dynamic of every relationship you're in, not through force but through alignment. People can feel when you are rooted in yourself. They sense that you are no longer available for connections that require you to fragment who you are. Some will rise to meet you there, adjusting their own patterns to honor the space you've claimed. Others will drift away, unable or unwilling to meet you at this level of truth. And while that can be painful, it is also clarifying. Sagittarius, your sovereignty is not about building walls. It's about building a foundation so solid that you can open your doors without fear. When you live from this place, you're not afraid to love deeply, because you know love is no longer a threat to your wholeness. You stop scanning for signs of rejection. You stop performing for approval. You start living in a way that honors your fire without apology. The return to yourself also changes how you handle the pull of old patterns. There will be moments when you feel the urge to slip back into waiting, when the familiar ache of longing tempts you to press pause on your own journey, just in case. But now you have a different compass. You ask yourself, will this choice expand me or diminish me? Will it bring me closer to my truth or further away? And you trust the answer even when it asks you to walk alone for a while. One of the most profound shifts in this sovereign state is the way you relate to your own desires. You stop treating them as negotiable. You stop downplaying them to fit into someone else's comfort zone. You allow yourself to want what you want without shame, without needing to justify it. And in doing so, you give permission to others, friends, lovers, even strangers, to do the same. This is why your return is not only a gift to yourself, but to the world. A sovereign Sagittarius inspires others to find their own center. Your unapologetic joy becomes an invitation. Your self-respect becomes a mirror. And those who are meant to walk beside you will find the courage to expand in your presence, rather than retreat from it. Lyra told me that once she stopped asking for permission to live fully, her partner began to change too. He saw that I wasn't waiting anymore, and something in him shifted, she said. But by then I wasn't doing it for him. I was doing it for me. That is the essence of sovereignty. You are no longer moving from a place of hoping to influence someone's choice. You are moving from the truth of who you are, regardless of how anyone responds. Sagittarius, the sovereign return is not a single act. It's a series of choices made day after day, that realign you with your essence. It's waking up in the morning and asking, what would I do today if I were living from my wholeness? And then doing it. It's letting your dreams breathe again, letting your laughter echo without restraint, letting your love flow without fear that it will cost you yourself. And here's the most beautiful part. Once you return to yourself, you realize you never truly left. Your essence has been here all along, waiting patiently beneath the layers of compromise and delay. The moment you choose to live from it, you step back into a rhythm that feels both brand new and achingly familiar, because it is the rhythm of your own life. Gate 4: Freedom in every breath. Freedom doesn't always announce itself with grand gestures or dramatic life changes. Sometimes it arrives in the simplest of moments, when you realize you've gone an entire day without measuring yourself against someone else's mood. When you take a deep breath and notice there's no heaviness in your chest, no subtle anxiety lurking beneath your ribs. Sagittarius, this is the kind of freedom that is felt more than it is seen. It's the quiet, steady hum of knowing you belong wholly to yourself. After reclaiming your sovereignty, you begin to notice how much energy you once spent scanning the emotional weather of those around you. You used to watch their tone, their expressions, their silences, adjusting yourself like a ship trimming its sails to unpredictable winds. But now you navigate by your own compass. You trust your own rhythm. You breathe, and the breath belongs entirely to you. I remember speaking with a Sagittarius man named Callan, who had lived years in relationships where his sense of peace rose and fell with his partner's approval. I didn't even realize how much I was holding my breath, he told me. Every choice I made, I'd check first, would this upset her? Would she pull away? When he began choosing himself, he didn't just change his schedule or his hobbies. He changed the way he inhabited his own skin. It was like my lungs got bigger, he said. Like I finally had enough air. This freedom is not the absence of love. It's the absence of fear inside love. It's the understanding that your value is constant whether or not someone affirms it. It's being able to give and receive affection without making it the currency that determines your self-worth. You stop negotiating your joy. You stop bargaining with your dreams. You stop thinking that your needs are inconveniences to be minimized. Sagittarius, as a fire sign ruled by Jupiter, your spirit was made for expansion. The cage, whether made of iron bars or silken threads, was never going to fit you for long. In this new space, your dreams are allowed to stretch without apology. You plan trips without wondering if they'll come along. You say yes to opportunities without first calculating whether they will approve. You love freely, not because you're certain of the outcome, but because you know love is an expression of who you are, not a contract you have to earn. And here's the paradox. When you stop holding yourself hostage to someone else's readiness, you become more magnetic. People are drawn to those who are grounded in their own freedom. Your presence becomes lighter, your laughter more contagious, your boundaries more natural. You are no longer tangled in the invisible threads of needing to be chosen. So your connections become cleaner, clearer, and more authentic. Callan found that as he stopped asking for permission to be himself, his relationships changed. Some deepened, others fell away. The ones that remained were the ones that could breathe alongside him, without grasping or fear. It was like I'd been holding my breath for years, he said. And when I exhaled, the people who could handle my full breath stayed. The rest just drifted off. And that was okay. Freedom in every breath also means you're no longer living in reaction. You're not scanning the horizon for signs of rejection or abandonment. You're not rehearsing conversations in your head to defend your choices. You're simply living moment by moment, with the ease of someone who knows their own worth and trusts their own steps. This is not to say you won't feel the pull of old habits. There will be days when the urge to shrink returns, when the echo of that waiting place calls you back. But freedom has a memory. Once you've felt it, you can't unknow it. You'll catch yourself mid-step and remember, I no longer live there. I no longer measure my life in someone else's timeline. Sagittarius, the air you breathe now is your own. The choices you make are your own. The path you walk, whether crowded or solitary, is yours to claim. And this freedom isn't just for the big moments. It's for the everyday ones. It's in the way you wake up without dread. The way you pour your coffee and let the morning sun hit your face without thinking about who might approve of your joy. The way you lie down at night with a steady heart, knowing you didn't abandon yourself today. Because at the end of it all, freedom isn't something you arrive at once and keep without effort. It's a practice. It's choosing again and again to honor your own breath, your own truth, your own fire. And every time you do, the world around you rearranges to meet the fullness of who you are. Conclusion: the moment you return. Sagittarius, this is not a story of leaving. It is a story of returning. Returning to the laughter you once dimmed. Returning to the dreams you placed on the shelf. Returning to the part of you that never stopped burning. Even when you tried to make yourself smaller for love, the turning point was never about them, it was always about you. Choosing yourself does not close you off to love. It opens you to the kind of love that honors your wholeness. It's the love that doesn't ask you to wait in the wings, but invites you to stand fully in your own light. And as you live from this truth, the landscape of your relationships shifts. The ones built on conditions and compromises fall away, making room for those who can meet you as an equal, not as someone they need to mold or manage. This moment, the one where you stop waiting and start walking, is the rebirth of your sovereignty. From here, every decision becomes an affirmation. I belong to myself first. You no longer bargain for space to breathe. You no longer pause your life for someone else's readiness. And the beautiful irony is that, in this freedom, you become the kind of person who is not only deeply loved but deeply respected. So take this with you. You are not the one waiting at the threshold hoping to be chosen. You are the one holding the key to your own door. Step through it, close it gently behind you, and know that every step you take now is not away from love, but toward the truest, most enduring love you will ever know, the one you have with yourself.